Hello and welcome to this session from Physical Science. We're going to be looking at part of Lesson 4, Chemistry. We're going to be looking at Lesson 4.1, the first reading, which is Classification of Matter. So this is one that doesn't really have practice questions to go over, and we do have a review that's on your student portal that covers most of the topics in this. So I'm just going to focus on one thing in particular for this one. So we're just going to focus on the periodic table, because I know when starting this chemistry lesson, you're introduced right away to this periodic table, and it really is intimidating for some students because you're looking at all these squares. There's 115 of them on here. They've got letters and numbers all over. You're just not really sure what's going on. So we're going to break that down and explain what's going on with this periodic table. So first, you've got all these squares on there. What's going on with each one? So each square is an individual element, and it gives you information about it. So what you'll notice is that each one has a large letter or two letters in it, and that's the symbol for the element. So with oxygen, the symbol for oxygen is O. So some of them are pretty straightforward like that. You've got oxygen. Helium, the symbol is He. So again, there are always one or two letters. And then there are some weird ones because you'll see things like sodium where the symbol is Na. So that's a little harder to recognize, a little harder to remember. Many periodic tables have both the symbol and they have the word written out just like this. So it'll say Na and then it'll also say sodium in smaller letters underneath just to help keep track of what's what. Some of them are named after Latin for that element or just different languages or named after places where they were discovered or things like that. So there's nothing we can change about it. It's just that some of them are going to be weird, like sodium. So to make things a little bit easier though, we do have a list that's in alphabetical order. So if you look on table 1 in your reading, it just lists them alphabetically, and then it gives you the symbol, and it gives you the same information that's on the periodic table, the atomic number and atomic mass. So if you're looking on the periodic table for an element and you just can't find it, you could check this table. So let's say you're looking for aluminum. Well, here's aluminum on the table. It's right with the A's. It tells you the symbol is Al. The atomic number is 13. So then you could bounce back to the periodic table, and they just go in order. We've got 1 to 2, and then we jump back to the left, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Back to 11, 12, and then 13. Here we go. Here is aluminum. So you could feel free to use that table 1 to help you find the elements. And again, it even gives you most of the information that's on the periodic table. So you could use it for that. Another helpful thing is that mostly this is what we're going to be worried about with the periodic table. So there is a section in your chemistry, 4.5, where it does talk about the different groups in the periodic table, and so it is going to look at the entire thing with all of these different groups. But when we're talking about actually doing chemical equations and balancing formulas, it's mostly just going to focus on these top 20 or so. So if you're looking for an element to actually do a formula with or an equation with, you just want to kind of start with these and see if it's one of those that are on the top. So back to the squares. So they've got the symbol for the element, but then they've also got numbers in there. So what's going on with that? Well, each element has an atomic number. That is the number of protons that are in that element. And that atomic number never changes because it defines the element. If you have an atom with 8 protons, it is oxygen. If you have an oxygen atom and you somehow removed protons or added protons, it wouldn't be oxygen anymore. Okay, so that atomic number is super important. It defines what the element is. It also is the same as the number of electrons. So atoms can gain or lose electrons, but if you're just talking about a normal neutral atom that hasn't gone through a chemical reaction where it's done that, it will have the same number of electrons as protons. So that atomic number is pretty useful. The other number you see in the squares of the periodic table would be the atomic mass. So this is the actual mass of the atom. You add up the mass of the protons and neutrons, electrons, you get this total atomic mass. Now normally we measure mass in kilograms, but atoms are so small that that would just be crazy. We couldn't possibly do that. So they have their own units that are called atomic mass units. So each square on the periodic table has the name of the element, the symbol of the element, the atomic number, and the mass number. Now, our periodic table that we give you in section 1.1, which you could use throughout the whole lesson, it's color-coded, so that might be a little bit overwhelming, but it's also helpful because you've got all these different groups, which again we talk about in lesson 4.5, but it color codes which ones are which. But I do know that it's small, and if you make it bigger, it gets a little blurry. So I would suggest trying this website, ptable.com. So P like for periodic table, just ptable. Oops. All right, so I clicked on it and there it is. So this is just a website that has the periodic table, and it's nice because if you hover over an element, it brings it up in a little square on the top, and it highlights which group it's in. So let's say we're just going to go over number 1 here, hydrogen. So then it brings hydrogen up in this green square here, showing you in just bigger text, here's the information for hydrogen. And then it also will highlight over here which group it's in. So hydrogen is highlighting as nonmetals, but then we could go to this stuff in group 1, and it highlights group 1 in the metals. Then we could go across all these other metals, and then when we get over here to the nonmetals, it highlights them. So it just highlights the groups. So I just like this site because it's pretty straightforward. It just has all the same information that your periodic table has, except it's a little bit easier to see, and it tells you which group each one is in. Okay. And again, the periodic table has all these different groups that we discuss later, but I do want to point out just one major thing about it is that generally you've got metals on the left, so there's different types of metals, but everything over here is metals, except for hydrogen. That's the only non-metal. And then you've kind of got this staircase here, this shape here that divides the metals from non-metals. So anything to the left of that is a metal. You've got this row here touching the top of the staircase. These are the metalloids. Those are kind of like metals, kind of like non-metals. They have some different properties of both. And then anything up and to the right of that is the non-metals. So those are all non-metals. Everything over here is metals. And right on that staircase line in between them is the metalloids. So again, you'll need to know a little bit more specific things about the other different groups, but that's an important thing to keep in mind. The metals, the non-metals, and the metalloids in between. So I hope that helped you understand the periodic table a little bit. If you have any more questions, definitely get in contact with us.